some weird stuff has been happening, and I wanted to share it with you very quickly. So let me see where I have it. Yeah, let's have a look at this one. So Elon Musk on X shared an interesting post, and then this post was initially, as you can see here, so kind of want to talk about it because it does have to do with history. So this is a post that Elon Musk reposted, and it's from Dr. Riccardo Duquesne, I don't know how to pronounce it, whatever. It's all about this, the concept of the world's indigenous peoples. And I do want to present a perspective on this, trying as always to keep it down to earth and real. Because these days, you really don't know what on earth is going on with the nomenclature, the rewriting of words, the changing of meaning, the changing of the past. It's been a mess. So the original person, Colin Wright, again, not sure who he is. Doesn't really matter, though. So what is this? What this is sort of the kind of stuff that it's been taught. And it says the world's indigenous people has no official definition by the UN due to diverse identities and histories. Instead, organizations utilize a modern understanding already that of the traits including self-identification, historical continuity with pre-settler societies. We're going to come back to that. Distinct systems and culture, and this already can be applied to any people on Earth, and a commitment to preserve heritage and environments. Here's a look at the latest available population distribution of the estimated 476 million indigenous people around the world. What do you notice about this map? What do you notice? Look at the pictures, and you will notice that there are areas that have no color whatsoever. That's one thing already. That's the first red flag. No, so you say Europe is white. No, problem is, according to these people, and of course this has entered academia as well, white people are not indigenous to anything. Europeans, I imagine, we come from another planet. Literally, the world's indigenous peoples, and you see Native Americans, I'm like, sure, I guess in Australia, I'll talk about Maori and that kind of stuff, and then China, whatever, Brazil, and the black people in Africa. Okay, where are white Europeans indigenous of? And the answer is nowhere, ladies and gentlemen. So, British people, not indigenous. I think, in fact, look at the top right. While indigenous peoples comprise 6% of the world's population, how is that possible? So are you telling me the Indians are not indigenous to India because there's 1.4 billion of those? I don't know if you know this, but the planetary half of the population is India and China. In case there's almost. I'll put an almost there, but just so we are clear. So problem is, as this guy is telling us, Colin, he says, I read a lot of woke scholarship, and the way the term indigenous is used makes it clear it's been treated as the antithesis of white, and I believe he's correct on this, because white is viewed as a nearly synonymous with colonizer settler. That's exactly it. Problem is, though, even if this was the case, right, that they decide, they being activists in collaborations with professors, let's not forget, if they decide that a colonizer settler is always the antithesis of an indigenous person, then why aren't Arabs ever, or in general Muslims, ever introduced into the colonizer settler? Because let me tell you that much. They are absolutely colonizers. So we're having a little bit of a situation here. In this framework, indigenous refers to pre-settler, blah, blah, blah. And so there is apparently a Wikipedia category, we'll check it out, but let's read what Dr. Riccardo says, and then I'll tell you my opinion. But I think what we're going to have to do after we read this and we see what the counter-argument is to this, then we'll have to really discuss what indigenous actually means. Not, well, we're going to take a well-established word and we're going to apply a semantic shift and we're going to change the meaning to suit our political needs, so that then we can rewrite history, because now that we have defined a word with a different meaning, then we can retroactively decide who it applies to. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much. This happens a lot, and it needs to be called out. All right, in Canadian universities, whites are simply not allowed to claim they are indigenous to any land in the world. Unbelievable. It is not only the Quebecois who founded French Canada through a very high birth rate, with only 1/7 of the inhabitants being immigrants when the province was conquered by the English in 1763, who are prohibited from being indigenous and must be identified as bad migrants who stole Canada. That is really, that's true, yes. How does that work, by the way, whereby you have currently Americans, white Americans, who have been in this country for 4 centuries, because there are people that trace back to the earliest colonies in Virginia, for instance. We're talking like, I don't remember exactly the date, but I think it's like 1607, something like that, 1609. There are families that trace back for 4 centuries, but they are invaders. They're not native. And yet, the guy from Mogadishu who arrived 2 weeks ago, no, he's just as American as anyone else. Let's speed up the citizenship so he can be an American. He doesn't even speak English. All European ethnic groups are denied identity to any land. That's true. They are civic citizens only, no more native to their lands than foreign immigrants. See, I think personally, I'm just going to tell you this. I think the end goal of this strategy, I'm so sorry that you're still staring at me. I think the end goal of this strategy, all European ethnic groups are denied this, is because this way you can say that an expression such as Europe belongs to the Europeans or England belongs to the English, that kind of statement is going to be like, no, you can't say that because you're not actually a native of this part, or you're not an indigenous of this area, so it belongs to everyone else. Yet, if you say Africa belongs to the Africans, no problem. Asia belongs to Asian is starting to be a problem, though, because Japan is pushing back. And so now they're being considered, Japanese are being considered, it's been a while already, but now even more so, they are considered white adjacent in Asia, which means they have now graduated to oppressor group because they don't want to put up with the nonsense that certain immigrant groups of a specific religion are the trouble that they're causing in the West. They don't want to have that. They don't want to deal with that. Of course, I don't mean every single Muslim is like this, we know, but we also have to specifically attest that there is a difference. Even if we're going to say, but it's only a certain percentage of them, they are actually nut jobs. Okay, I agree with that. But what's the percentage of Swiss immigrants to England or America that cause trouble? You tell me that, and then we can see why I think Japan is like, we're not putting up with that. So now, I guess Japan for the Japanese is not acceptable either, which kind of shows you how malleable the oppressor-oppressed dichotomy is. Today you may be in the oppressed category, but tomorrow, you never know. This view is now officially consolidated in Wikipedia. The entry for indigenous Europeans identifies only minority non-dominant groups with distinct pre-modern histories, marginalized languages, or traditional livelihoods. It excludes all majority populations of European nation-states. The indigenous groups listed include the Sami in northern Scandinavia, Russia, Basques, Ingrian, Finns, Voltians, and Pelasgians. So, Italians, French, all the Nordics are not indigenous to Scandinavia and the Nordic countries as a whole. So someone from Iceland, a Nordic country, but you're not indigenous? This is ridiculous. There was nothing. When they arrived there was a little bit of grass, 1%, by the way. I think it's like 1.1% of the entirety of the land in Iceland is arable, and the rest is like green grass, beautiful scenery, a couple of animals, not many trees were there when people arrived, but no, they're not indigenous. Unbelievable. Only non-whites can be indigenous to their lands with their indigeneity, what a word, increasing in its identity to the degree that they were colonized by whites. Yeah, it's absolutely nonsense. You see, Western land, in as far as they are making the case that they are as Germanic as Germans or Swedish or Swedes and blah, 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 they are considered marginalized and discriminated against, which meets a key political criterion for it. Yeah, it's nonsense. And I'm going to say it's a racist positioning. So, indigenous from dictionary.com, adjective originating or occurring naturally in a particular place, native. So a white perfectly a white person, white European, white American, perfect. Merriam-Webster. What have you got to say? Usually indigenous relating to descended from the earliest known inhabitants of a place, and especially of a place that was colonized. They did add it. Although both are there. So at least, while they did add this, which is nonsense, the first one still, you can't remove white then. If this is also part of it. Relating to or descended from the earliest known inhabitants. Used to refer to the people who originally lived in a place rather than the people who moved there from somewhere else, or to things that relate to these people. Okay, so here's the thing though. Of course I prefer this because it doesn't exclude anyone, in the sense that yes, it excludes if there is a recent, I would say, but yeah, that's a point though. Temporally, you gotta put a specification here if we're going to use it at an academic sense. Otherwise, it just becomes a word to use when you feel like it. It's like an emotional word. But if it needs to be scientifically precise, then what is the time frame for that? Because if you have people, you could have people who had lived in a specific area for thousands of years, but we could know that 15,000 years before, there was in that specific period of prehistory, there was another people. So what do we do? At that point, are those the indigenous, and the others, they're going to stay there now for 100,000 years until the sun runs out of whatever the heck, and still not? Ooh, I just realized something. All the Latino, that's a problem. What do you do when there is a split? Like, because clearly there were indigenous populations before the arrival of the Europeans, the Spanish and the Portuguese. But the current Latinos, like Mexicans, when it comes to like North America, Mexico is in North America. Whether it be Mexico, whether it be Peru, a lot of the people there, they are kind of mixed, right? Because Mexico, originally the land of the Mexicas or the Aztecs, but they intermingled with the Spaniard, with the Europeans. So current Mexicans kind of, in fact, they speak Spanish. And so what about those? Because there's been intermingling there. Well, they're not going to say that. They're going to say, no, Mexico for the Mexicans, because as long as you're not 100% white, you're not going to be attacked. That's the idea. Profound injustice, they have to put the virtual signaling. I don't know why I clicked to relate. Indigenous, yeah, so that's that. Man, that's so annoying. I really believe that academia as a whole is lost unless we do something about this. Not just this, but I'm saying in general. I just read earlier on today, an article whereby University of Toronto was actually looking for a professor of biology at the university. And they said the requirements to fill this specific job position, you have to have this, whatever the heck, PhD in this, PhD in that, biology, whatever the heck. Then the requirements were you have to be either non-binary, transgender, identify as whatever, be any of the minorities. So basically, if you're white and straight, you can't have the job. That's racist. It is what it is. And that's what we have to deal with. So yeah, this is an egregious map, and it's this. They may try to paint it as no, but we're doing it because we want to care about these people, and we want to. And these people have been mistreated. Everyone has been mistreated, by the way. But these people have been mistreated. No, you're doing it to foster division and to point the finger at white people and demonize a specific group, which is exactly what the Nazis did. So, if you really cared about fostering the cultural importance or richness of all of these groups, then do that, right? Tell me about the languages spoken by the Maori. Tell me about the whatever it is. Pick any of these and tell me about their history, their stuff. Know that what they do is that they will never make a documentary. They will never make a movie about a group like this because they know it won't sell. Instead, they'll take Greek history and swap it all. Swap all the races. Put all the marginalized group. Who cares about Greek representation, am I right? That's what they're going to do. And we're always going to push back. They're going to call us racist, and we are back to square one. And it's really tiring. Yeah, by the way, this term, aborigines, comes from Latin, ab origines, or originem, which means at the origin. And it's the term the ancient Romans created to talk about sort of their ancestors, in the sense of the people that they found there when the first settlers of the Romans arrived. So they arrived in the area where they're like, we're going to found Rome. There were people there. And they refer to them as ab origines. We don't know who they were. There are some ideas. They may have been Italic. We are not sure. What's interesting is that the group that arrived, the mythology of it is that they are basically Trojans running away, but that's the mythology. Regardless, this group that are the ancestors of the Romans, and then this other group that were in that area, they mingle. They have a king, and his name is Latinus, and so that's how the Latins are born, mixing these two people. The term Aborigines is a European term. Take that. Even the etymology connects with what we mean. Sprung from the land, native. Exactly. Under international law, goodness gracious.